one of the things I wanted to talk about, and maybe we can chat about that a little, is how the progress in AI has affected. Well, I was going to talk about how it's affected my view on mathematics and what it means to me to do mathematics. And yeah, I'd be interested in your takes on this as well. So, it's not. So obviously, I chose mathematics as a career, and maybe I don't want to pretend it was some very well thought out process, right? Where I wrote down a list of 10 things and made lists of pros and cons and actually made some rational decision. It wasn't really like that. It was partly just, well, what else am I going to do? And I kind of like doing this, and everything else seems uninteresting to me, or just not that interesting right now, so I'll keep going with this. But if I reflect more on what I found meaningful about the activity of doing mathematics as a career, well, I like teaching, that's part of it. But if I was only teaching, I wouldn't want to do this job. I'd go do something else. So what really keeps me in it as a career is the research. That's true of a lot of people. And why do I find research a kind of meaningful activity? And that's not a question that should be, sort of has to be considered in the context of the costs, right? So as anybody who's done a master's or a PhD in an area like mathematics knows, it's not that it's a hobby that takes 1 hour of your day or something, right? It's quite a consuming activity. And it comes with opportunity costs. You're not spending time on other things. You may be sometimes not spending as much time with your loved ones as you'd wish when there are lots of things to do and difficult things to prove. So why do all that? Why make those sacrifices for the research? What is the motivating factor there? And it varies. So when I ask my friends and colleagues about why they do it, sometimes it's people like to compete, and mathematics is for some people, a very competitive activity, and you get to prove you're smarter than most people, and if you climb up far enough, maybe one of the smartest people, that's attractive to some people. That's a very small part of my motivation, if any, but that is important to some people, and I don't begrudge them that. For others, it's a sense of liking to solve puzzles, and here's a kind of endless source of increasingly difficult puzzles. It's like Baba is you, but you never run out of levels. And that's pretty attractive to some people. And then for others, there's a sense of contributing to something greater than yourself that isn't sullied by corruption and is maybe true even, and has been building for hundreds of years and has made a positive contribution to human well-being. And maybe for many that approaches something like a religious commitment, right? There's Platonic heaven, and I get to see a little bit of it. People are sort of, to varying degrees, open about that as a feeling that they value. Many may only say it in private, but I think it's a part of the motivation for many people. And for most, it's kind of a mix of all of those in various proportions, and maybe other motivations you can think of. And I think it's it's underthought of how much the progress in AI affects some or all of those motivations, and will come to be felt strongly by many people that it affects those motivations. Can you think of other motivations besides the ones I listed that you personally feel strongly, or that you could think of other people as feeling?
I think kind of similar to what you were saying. Oh, sorry, you go.
Maybe just having like a doctor in front of your name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess that
well,
ties into the
you
first
just
one.
need a PhD for that, and then you can just go do something else, and you still get to keep the doctor. But do you mean like
I
reaching
think what I
some
was
level of
thinking.
attainment, like doing a difficult thing that you can be proud of? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's fair. Ben.
I was thinking, sorry, that um, like I guess something that I've always thought, kind of similar to what you were saying about how kind of helping people, maybe quite indirectly through doing pure math, but you're still contributing to society in a positive way. And I think something I wondered is like, oh, why do I choose to do it in this kind of abstract, indirect way than to go, I don't know, work somewhere else doing
Mm.
something probably more hands-on, helpful. But I think because, like you said, I kind of just fell into enjoying solving puzzles, and now I'm like in a PhD because I get to keep solving puzzles, and it's like, well, I also have a strong desire to like, I guess, do something good for the world. But most people who have this feeling haven't already got a master's degree in mathematics, and so maybe it makes sense to just like keep going in this field because the amount of people who I guess have this overlap, or people who like want to help but also have the potential to go far in maths is quite small.
Mm.
At least that's kind of my thought process on it.
Were you going to say something, Owen?
Oh, I guess I've never really thought of it as something that's particularly helpful to humanity. Um, I guess I mean I can see why people would think that. I suppose maybe I mean more in terms of like my what I would be able to like personally
Mm.
contribute like um yeah.
I suppose one has to distinguish between good for humanity in the sense that tomorrow or even in the indefinite future it will have applications that, say in health or
Yeah.
something tangible in the real world versus just, well, contributing a concerto to the benefit of the
Mm.
sum total of beauty in the world or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I suppose the sort of like mathematical culture as a whole, you're quite by sort of, I mean, it's not just you do a PhD and this like little brick gets added to the vast edifice of mathematical knowledge, but probably the ways in which mathematical culture is valuable is not exactly doesn't exactly correspond to progress in research.
Mm. Could you say more about that?
Well, like I don't know, like say just like on a personal level, like I don't think what I've you know what I might done with my PhD will ever kind of like see the light of day in terms of like an application. Um, but
But you say you don't
I don't
think of
know.
it
Yeah,
as a brick in the
no,
edifice.
I don't think so. Um, but I mean, it just seems kind of I don't know, it seems implausible.
Well, what is
Um,
the edifice there? If the edifice is just human knowledge, isn't it in fact a brick in
yeah,
the edifice?
yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, but I guess I think the edit it's kind of sure. I also don't quite think of it as really being an edifice because I mean mathematics is forgotten as well. Like
Right. Yeah.
um,
Mm.
it's a kind of culture that's alive,
Mm.
and of course it makes progress, in a very real sense. But
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I see the point about the analogy of an edifice. Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah. I mean, I guess if I'm thinking about my own motivations, it's very hard to. I find it very hard to know exactly what. I think there's kind of three different reasons that you outlined. Um, they all seem relevant in various degrees. I mean, I would probably, you could sort of inflect them slightly differently, but yeah. I mean, I wonder, like, where do you think that, in terms of the experiential aspect of it, say, you know, or the aesthetic aspect of it, the part which is kind of, you know, beautiful, because that's a beauty, something you experience, not a kind of, it's not just a kind of, you know,
and there's a part on that list.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a part on that list that I suppose that needs expanding, which is the difference between appreciating beauty. So I can listen to a performance or hear someone present a proof or read a proof that is beautiful, and I can admire it.
Yeah,
that's a good feeling. But a different, although related, good feeling is coming up with something new yourself that you think is beautiful. And that feeling of going beyond the sum total of human knowledge and carving out a little thing, that is the really attractive part of doing research. If in mathematics all I could foresee doing for the rest of my career was just, I mean, I like reading books and learning new things, and get a big kick out of acquiring and understanding interesting proofs. But if that was all I was going to get out of the rest of my career in mathematics, like, I wouldn't be sad about that. To get paid to do that is pretty good, right? That's a lot. That's a very privileged life. But I would get antsy and go do something else after some time. It wouldn't retain the vibrancy that is what attracts me to this career. So for me, it is important that I'm at least can manage to fool myself into thinking I'm doing something new, and maybe by my own lights significant. That's the part of the motivational sort of system that really matters for me, and I think it's the part that I foresee being pretty rapidly undermined by advances in AI, actually, unfortunately.
If in like the twilight of your career, Dan, do you think if you realize, say, in 20 years that you weren't going to contribute anything new, but you're still like employed, would that like motivate you to retire, or would you still want to like stick around to like, I guess, read and teach or something?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose people usually transition at some point to, I mean, you can always keep doing new things, right? They may not be at the level of what you used to do. So it's not, once you've acquired enough knowledge and, you know, in enough particular areas, you can always keep making contributions. So you usually don't have to quite face that question straight on. But, you know, usually people will do more supervising of students or teach more or write books. I mean, the mathematical culture, as Owen said, is a living thing, and, you know, elders have a role to play in any community in sort of keeping it sane and keeping alive the knowledge that should be kept alive, and making sure the younger generation are doing okay and not going crazy in overly high proportion and so on. And those are not easy things, right? It's not trivial to maintain a highly functioning culture that passes on its knowledge and doesn't forget everything every generation. So those are worthy tasks to do. They're not the same tasks as, you know, proving deep theorems, but they are also important, and, you know, deserve to be done well. So yeah, I think it's I wouldn't just retire. I think that would be a bit selfish to kind of just retire the moment that the kind of hedonistic joy of proving cool new theorems starts to evaporate or something.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think like the mathematicians will have a kind of oracular role in the sense that, you know, it's the AI that's, you know, discovering new theorems, but I mean, I suppose, you know, it's just a matter of, you know, I mean, I don't really understand how the systems would work, but you would, you know, I mean, there's a process by which, when like someone comes up with a new proof of something, the community tries to understand it.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess that would work in a similar way. Though people might get sick of it. Like, what do you actually see happening?
That's what I expect to be what mathematics looks like within a generation or so. Yeah. I mean, you could say that mathematics and much of intellectual life was like that for hundreds of years, right? Prior to the scientific revolution, right? If it was just kind of passing down knowledge, and people were having ideas, but the sort of there wasn't a lot of progress maybe for hundreds of years in the 15th, 14th, 16th centuries, as far as I understand it, right? That's.
I didn't know. I mean, I'm not sure I would see it that way. I don't know, like just like a random example, but like if you think about, I don't know, like Thomas Aquinas, someone like that. Like, I mean, I agree that I wouldn't sort of see a sort of medieval Christian philosopher like that in a kind of sort of like a kind of progression, exactly, like where his. I mean, I think that would be the wrong way to think about it, but I also think maybe thinking about it that way it's a bit reductive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, maybe progress is the wrong framing to put on it, but it's more like perhaps there's not deep progress originating from humans in, say, mathematics in that period. But there's reinterpretation, and there's like, as other ideas evolve, things not outside of mathematics, there may be new views on the mathematics, and we sort of think about it differently. And it's not that's not a bad thing, right? But it's very different from the flavor of mathematics as it has felt to be a part of it over the last few hundred years.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think this period, I mean, I don't know when you'd exactly date the beginning of it, but let's say from, Newton's time or 100 years before that until now, or a few decades from now, I think it probably will be looked back on as a rather exceptional period in the history of mathematics in terms of mathematical culture. And we probably find it a bit hard to imagine now, but that transition from the period before that time to the period that we're in now, that is also hard for us to imagine. I think the kind of mindset, I find it very difficult to inhabit the mindset of the world kind of before the scientific revolution, right?
Yeah.
It's not like the people there weren't brilliant. There were many brilliant people there, but when you read what they write, it's clearly a different relationship to the ideas than we're used to. So yeah, I do think that, well, if the trajectory that I expect turns out to be the case, and AIs are proving theorems at human level, and not only proving theorems, but they kind of get it, right? Not in some superficial mechanical way, but they get it as deeply as we do, and can grasp the ideas and present them as beautifully as we can, then it will be a very difficult time to maintain the same kind of motivations that we currently have, at least the ones that I value. I mean, I had this discussion with a colleague of mine, Arun Ram, who many of you know, and I talked about this with him, and he said, "Oh, that's fine. I'll be perfectly happy. I'll be happy to learn math in the same way that I go to a classical performance and appreciate how beautiful it is." And I actually think that's, like, a part of me just viscerally rejects that. That's like not at all cool with me. But I can see, like, it's also quite wise, I think, right? It's, if you think about attending a live performance, you value that humans are doing it, right? And it's a celebration of the commitment that it takes to train to do that and to work together, and that human beings working together can achieve this beautiful thing, and you get to be a part of that, just sitting in the audience. And I can imagine people getting the same thrill out of doing that with mathematics. And in the end, that's kind of what meta-uni is to some degree, right? It's like or a university. We come together, we watch each other present and learn mathematics, and we feel good about that. Even if, it's only a relatively small percentage of the time that we're doing new math or really pushing the boundaries on anything. And that can keep going. But I do think that there will be some important element that gets quite devalued as the AIs progress. And there's an interesting, we've discussed this before in the seminar, but it's good to be reminded about Lee Sedol's quote when he retired from professional Go playing in 2019, I think. So he said, with the debut of AI in Go games, I'm not at the top, even if I become the number one through frantic efforts. And I think that definitely captures a bit of my feeling looking forward to AIs in mathematics. He's motivated by competition, as you can see in that quote, more than I am, but the feeling of having to sacrifice a lot and work really hard to get to the forefront of knowledge in some direction, but then no matter what you do, you're always going to be way behind the frontier because you can never match up to the AIs. That'll be so deflating.
That's identity doesn't make much sense anymore, right? Which is, I think it's important to a lot of people. But
sorry, say that again? I didn't hear the beginning of that.
Well, that identity, it's harder to sort of, doesn't make as much sense.
Right.
This idea that you would go to these sort of immense efforts and I agree with you.
Yeah, we see stories about, for example, Yitang Zhang recently. He's working at Subway and sleeping in his car for years, toiling away at proving some deep theorem. And right now we think of that as heroic, right? That's like, go human. Like, I don't want that life. That sounds terrible, but go human. Like doing it for the team. That's great. But in a world where the AIs could do it in 30 seconds for 5 cents, it would seem rather different, right? It would seem kind of actually a little bit insane,
right.
which is really sad somehow. It's losing something about the world to not be able to feel that pride in your fellow human, and to instead feel it's kind of a little bit pointless or like sacrificing other sources of well-being that a human can find in a fully realized life in order to pursue some narrow end that actually can be achieved in a much easier way. All right, we can continue this discussion. I propose we migrate over to the tea break location. So if you can just follow me, and I'll have something to show off.
Okay.
I feel like it goes to like Room Like or something. And now it has him for this.
All right.
Did you get the surprise?
Which one?
Yes.
Investigate the bear more closely. As in, there's something in the image you have to click to see.
Oh,